The process of creating a device, setting it up, continues when you actually try to process the first image taken with a new device, which we can demonstrate here. So this is a picture that has been taken with the Danish telescope after I set up the device. And when you start processing that, if you click on the first processing step, it will ask you for the target name and the device, and as soon as you enter this, you will be shown the actual setup page for the device. Because what the next step of the processing will do, will try to read out the header information in your picture to extract some data, i.e. the time and date of the observation, the filter the observation has been taken in, and the exposure time. These things are needed for statistical evaluations and for the calibration, in particular the filter. The date is of course important to plot the light curves later on. So what you basically need to tell the software is which FITS header card contains the relevant information. So for the exposure time, if you click on that, you get a list of all the FITS header cards that your file contains, and you simply need to select the one that contains the correct exposure time. If you have a single image that you've processed and have uploaded, then it's the header card which contains the exposure time, so something like that. But if you've stacked your images together, what we are interested in is not the individual exposure time of your picture, but the total exposure time of your image. So in our case, that total exposure time, basically the sum of all the exposure times of all the images that we've added up, is stored in a FITS header called exposure_total. So we can select this. For the filter, again, we simply need to select the FITS header card which contains the information which filter is being used, and so again you just scroll down until you find the FITS header card that describes the filter that you're using. In our case it's filter A. We select that. For the time, there's two things to fill out. One is in what format the data is stored. So if you click on that, you get a selection. So we allow the entries either be Julian date or modified Julian date, or to have a normal date and time, but the information is stored in one FITS header card, or you got date and time in two separate fields. So you got a date in one card and a time in another. So if you select that, you'll simply get two entries which you need to select. Any of the others will basically only give you one FITS header card where the information is stored. And again, if you have a single exposure, then what we would be interested in is really the time the exposure was taken. Typically for single exposure, it doesn't really matter if it's the beginning or the end of the exposure, because typically these things are just a few minutes apart, and we're interested in very long-term light curves. However, if you have stacked several images in the same night with an hour of integration time or something like that, then the date or the time should represent the middle of the exposure, or the average time of the middle of your exposures of the individual images. So again, in our case, we've made a separate FITS header that is generated when the images are added together, and we simply store the Julian date or the average of all the Julian dates of the midpoints of all the individual exposures. And once you're done with all that, all you need to do is press Add Header Cards to Device. So then this information will be stored, and then all the other steps when you have new images will be run completely automatically. Please note that you cannot change the entries of the fit header card. So once you press submit, all these entries are fixed. They cannot be changed. If you done a mistake, then you need to contact me on the email address that is here on the screen to make some changes. If you change your data analysis, so the output that produces your image, and you change the name of any of your fit header cards, then the simplest way would be to simply create a new device and use this for processing all the images afterwards. The reason for this is if we have for some reason have to reprocess some of the older pictures, then we will not be able to do this if you've changed these entries for these fit header cards. That's why we simply do not allow the general user to change these entries. So you need to contact me by email if there's a mistake in there somewhere, and then I'll change these entries